Lift up your heart and praise. Lift up your hands and praise. Lift up your voice and praise.
And Moshe said, Hear, O Yisrael, Yahweh your Elohim, Yahweh is one, and you shall love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart, with all your being, and with all your might. And these words which I am commanding you today shall be in your heart. And you shall impress them upon your children, and shall speak of them when you sit in your house and when you walk by the way, when you lie down and when you rise up, and shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes, and you shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Shabbat Shalom to everyone worshiping with us at home. It's a blessing to be here today, and we're glad to have you join us. Amen? Amen. You know, oftentimes our congregation out there is bigger than the one that's in here, so we're glad to get to meet everyone when we do get an opportunity to meet new people. Amen. The name of the message today is One Foot in the Word and One Foot in the World. Now, Day of Atonement starts this week at sundown on the fourth day, and I would like for us to consider some of the things that we're preparing ourselves for as we prepare ourselves for it. Hopefully, you've already been preparing yourself for it. And we're going to read a good bit of Scripture today, and I'm looking forward to that. Let's take a look at the command to observe this day and look at some other things with regard to it. Leviticus chapter 23. YHWH 23. We're going to start reading in verse 26, and we're going to be on page 130 of the 1998 ISR. Leviticus 23:26. It says, And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, On the 10th day of this 7th month is the Day of Atonement. It shall be a set-apart gathering for you, and you shall afflict your being, and shall bring an offering made by fire to Yahweh. And you do no work on that same day, for it is the Day of Atonement to make atonement for you before Yahweh your Elohim. For any being who is not afflicted on that same day, he shall be cut off from his people. And any being who does any work on that same day, that being I shall destroy from the midst of his people. You do no work, a law forever throughout your generations in all your dwellings. It is a Sabbath of rest to you, and you shall afflict your being on the 9th day of the month at evening. From evening to evening you observe your Sabbath. Okay, now I want to take a look at what happens on Day of Atonement. So flip back just a little bit to Leviticus 16. We're going to start reading in verse 1. And it says, And Yahweh spoke to Moshe after the death of the two sons of Aharon, as they drew near before Yahweh and died. And Yahweh said to Moshe, Speak to Aharon, your brother, not to come in at all times to the set-apart place inside the veil before the lid of atonement which is on the ark, lest he die, because I appear in the cloud above the lid of atonement. With this, Aharon should come into the set-apart place with the blood of a young bull as a sin offering and of a ram as a burnt offering. He should put on the set-apart linen long shirt with linen trousers on his flesh, and gird himself with a linen girdle, and be dressed with a linen turban. They are set-apart garments. And he shall bathe his body in water, and shall put them on. And from the congregation of the children of Yisrael, he takes 2 male goats as a sin offering, and 1 ram as a burnt offering. And Aharon shall bring the bull as a sin offering, which is for himself, and make atonement for himself and for his house. And he shall take the 2 goats, and let them stand before Yahweh at the door of the tent of meeting. And Aharon shall cast lots for the 2 goats, 1 lot for Yahweh, and the other lot for Azazel. And Aharon shall bring the goat on which the lot for Yahweh fell, and shall prepare it as a sin offering. But the goat on which the lot for Azazel fell is caused to stand alive before Yahweh to make atonement upon it, to send it into the wilderness to Azazel. And Aharon shall bring the bull of the sin offering, which is for himself, and make atonement for himself and for his house, and shall slaughter the bull as a sin offering, which is for himself, and shall take a fire holder filled with burning coals of fire from the altar before Yahweh, with his hands filled with sweet incense beaten fine, and shall bring it inside the veil. And he shall put the incense on the fire before Yahweh, and the cloud of incense shall cover the lid of atonement which is on the witness, lest he die. And he shall take some of the blood of the bull and sprinkle it with his finger on the lid of atonement, and on the east side, also in front of the lid of atonement, he sprinkles some of the blood with his finger 7 times. And he shall slaughter the goat of the sin offering, which is for the people, and shall bring its blood inside the veil, and shall do with that blood as he did with the blood of the bull, and sprinkle it on the lid of atonement and in front of the lid of atonement. And he shall make atonement for the set-apart place, because of the uncleanliness of the children of Israel, and because of their transgressions and all their sins. And so he does for the tent of meeting, which is dwelling with them in the midst of their uncleanliness. And no man should be in the tent of meeting when he goes in to make atonement in the set-apart place until he comes out. And he shall make atonement for himself and for his household and for all the assembly of Israel. And he shall go out to the altar that is before Yahweh and make atonement for it, and he shall take some of the blood of the bull and some of the blood of the goat and put it on the horns of the altar all around. And he shall sprinkle some of the blood on it with his finger 7 times and cleanse it and set it apart from the uncleanliness of the children of Israel. And when he has finished atoning for the set-apart place and the tent of meeting with the altar, he shall bring the live goat. And then Aharon shall lay both his hands on the head of the live goat, and shall confess over it all the crookedness of the children of Israel, and all their transgressions and all their sins, and shall put them on the head of the goat, and shall send it away into the wilderness by the hand of a fit man. And the goat shall bear on itself all their crookedness to a land cut off. Thus he shall send the goat away into the wilderness. Aharon shall then come into the tent of meeting, and shall take off the linen garments which he put on when he went into the set-apart place, and shall leave them there. And he shall bathe his body in water in the set-apart place, and shall put on his garments, and shall come out and prepare his burnt offering and the burnt offering of the people, and make atonement for himself and for the people, and burn the fat of the sin offering on the altar. And he who sent away the goat to Azazel washes his garments, and shall bathe his body in water, and afterward he comes into the camp. And the bull for the sin offering and the goat for the sin offering, whose blood was brought in to make atonement in the set-apart place, is brought outside the camp, and they shall burn their skins and their flesh and their dung with fire. And he who burns them washes his garments, and he shall bathe his body in water, and afterwards he comes into the camp. And this day shall be for you a law forever. In the 7th month, on the 10th day of the month, you afflict your beings, and do no work, the native or the stranger who sojourns among you. For on that day he makes atonement for you, to cleanse you, to be clean from all your sins before Yahweh. It is a Sabbath of rest for you, and you shall afflict your being, a law forever. And the priest who is anointed and ordained to serve as priest in his father's place shall make atonement, and shall put on the linen garments, the set-apart garments, and he shall make atonement for the most set-apart place, and make atonement for the tent of meeting, and for the altar, and make atonement for the priests, and for all the people of the assembly. And this shall be for you a law forever, to make atonement for the children of Israel for all their sins once a year. And he did as Yahweh commanded Moshe. All right, so we understand that this day is set apart for the forgiveness of sin, right? Got that right. Now I want to change gears just a little bit, but don't worry, I'm going to come back and connect the dots, hopefully. All right, and so just bear with me. John chapter 2. John chapter 2. Going to be on page 1019, and we're going to be starting in verse 12. John chapter 2, verse 12. And after this, he, that would be Yahushua, went down to Capernaum, he and his mother and his brothers and his taught ones, and there they stayed not many days. And the Passover of the Yehudim, that's the Jews, was near, and Yahushua went up to Jerusalem. And he found in the set-apart place those selling oxen and sheep and doves and the money changers sitting, and having made a whip of cords, he drove them out of the set-apart place with the sheep and the oxen, and poured out the money changers' coins, and overturned the tables. Before I keep reading, I want you to notice, he sat down and premeditated, made that whip of cords. All right? I got a sneaking suspicion that he just kept thinking hard about what was going on while he was making that whip of cords. But anyway, verse 16. And he said to those selling doves, take these away. Do not make the house of my Father a house of merchandise. And his taught ones remembered that it was written, the ardor of your house has eaten me up. And the Yehudim answered and said to him, what sign do you show us, since you are doing these? And Yahushua answered and said to them, destroy this dwelling place, and in 3 days I shall raise it. Then the Yehudim said, it took 46 years to build this dwelling place, and you're going to raise it in 3 days? But he spoke about the dwelling place of his body. So, when he was raised from the dead, his taught ones remembered that he had said this to them, and they believed the Scripture and the word which Yahushua had said. I think it's interesting to note that Yahushua and not Paul is who first referred to the body as the dwelling place. All right? Paul always gets credit for that, but Yahushua does it first right here. Did you know that Yahushua drove the money changers out of the set-apart place on 2 different occasions? He did. See, this is chapter 2 of John. All right, this is early on. All right, Matthew 21, Mark 11, and Luke 19 tell of a similar occurrence, but you can tell that's later on. All right, they tell of a similar occurrence which took place not near the beginning of Yahshua's ministry, but much closer to his impalement, when Yahushua came riding on the colt and the people were crying, Hoshiana, blessed is he who comes in the name of Yahweh. All right. None of the synoptic books say anything about the whip of cords. And I'll quote Yahushua referring to Isaiah and Jeremiah where it says, it has been written, my house shall be called a house of prayer, but you have made it a, what? Den of robbers. Right? But here in the 2nd chapter of John, it does not mention the house of prayer or the den of robbers. Yahushua says, take these away, do not make the house of my Father a house of merchandise. Right? It's different language. All right? So the second point being that Yahushua will come into the Hekal, the temple, angrily, where there are those using it for their own purposes, and throw them out. All right, we'll see that, right? All right. Look at 1 Corinthians chapter 3. First Corinthians chapter 3. Where's he going with this? We're going to start reading in verse 16. We're going to be on page 1104. First Corinthians 3, verse 16. Do you not know that you are a dwelling place of Elohim, and that the Spirit of Elohim dwells in you? If anyone destroys the dwelling place of Elohim, Elohim shall destroy him. For the dwelling place of Elohim is set apart, which you are. Now, that's something to think about as we are approaching atonement. It's something that we ought to be thinking about when we get on the other side of atonement. Day to day, All right. Verse 18. Let no one deceive himself. If anyone among you seems to be wise in this age, let him become foolish so that he might become wise. For the wisdom of this world is foolishness with Elohim, for it has been written, He catches the wise in their craftiness. And again, Yahweh knows the thoughts of the wise, that they are worthless. So then, let no one boast in men, for all belongs to you, whether Shaul or Apollos or Kepha, or the world or life or death, or the present or the future. All belongs to you. And you belong to Messiah, and Messiah belongs to Elohim. All right. Now, Shaul wants this assembly in Corinth to understand that they are the dwelling place of Elohim with His Spirit. Right? All right. Now, note what he says further down in chapter 6. Chapter 6, verse 1. Should any of you holding a matter against another go to be judged before the unrighteous and not before the set apart ones? Do you not know that the set apart ones shall judge the world? And if the world is judged by you, are you unworthy to judge the smallest matters? Do you not know that we shall judge messengers? How much more matters of this life? If then you truly have judgments of this life, do you appoint them as judges who are least esteemed by the assembly? I say this to your shame. Is it so that there is not a wise one among you, not even one who shall be able to judge between his brothers? But brother against brother goes to be judged, and that before unbelievers. Already then, there is a failure with you, that you have lawsuits among you. Why not rather be wronged? Why not rather be cheated? Do you yourselves do wrong and cheat? And that to your brothers. Do you not know that the unrighteous shall not inherit the reign of Elohim? Do not be deceived. Neither those who whore, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor effeminate, nor homosexuals, nor thieves, nor greedy of gain, nor drunkards, nor revilers, nor swindlers shall inherit the reign of Elohim. And such were some of you. But you were washed, but you were set apart, but you were declared right in the name of the Master Yahushua, and by the Spirit of our Elohim. Now, I think what we're about to read in this next example of Paul is Paul being sarcastic. All right, he's being sarcastic about an idea of permissiveness that was floating around Corinth. All right, and what we're about to read, there are those that I have heard who have perverted this next passage to lawlessness, and you'll see what I'm talking about. But do not lose sight of what Paul just said about those who will not inherit the reign of Elohim when we're looking at this, okay? Don't lose sight of that. And then I want you to couple with that what he says afterwards. Just after this, verse 12. Paul says, all is permitted me, but not all do profit. All is permitted me, but I shall not be under authority of any. Do you remember what we just read? Okay, that's why I say it. So let's read it this way. I can do whatever I want, whether it profits or not. I can do whatever I want to. Nobody is going to tell me what to do. Verse 13. Food for the stomach and stomach for foods. You know people who will use this as a proof text to excuse themselves to be able to eat the abomination, right? All right. Now, but look at what Paul says next. But Elohim shall destroy both it and them. See, that's why we're listening to Paul be sarcastic here, all right? Paul says that, he says, but Elohim shall destroy both it and them, and the body is not for whoring, but for the master, and the master for the body. And Elohim, who raised up the master, shall also raise us up through his power. Do you not know that your bodies are members of Messiah? Shall I then take the members of Messiah and make them members of a whore? Let it not be. Or do you not know that he who is joined to a whore is one body? For he says, the two shall become one flesh. And he who is joined to the master is one spirit. Flee whoring. Every sin that a man does is outside the body, but he who commits whoring sins against his own body. Or do you not know that your body is the dwelling place of the set-apart Spirit who is in you, which you have from Elohim, and you are not your own? You were bought with a price. Therefore esteem Elohim in your body and in your spirit, which are of Elohim. Okay? My question is, what will Yahshua's reaction be should he come into the dwelling place of your body or my body? Would it be, a house of prayer. This is what I lived and died for. Or would he need to come in there with a whip of cords? Do you not know that your bodies are the dwelling place of the set-apart Spirit of Elohim? That's really something to think about. Amen? All right? Turn with me to Galatians 5. Galatians is a book where Paul does away with everything. That's what they say. Yeah, you know, let's see. You know that Paul spent much of his ministry trying to turn people away from the laws of the rabbis. All right, that has to be taken in context when we read these things. He's turning them away from their laws and their traditions that nullify the commands of Elohim, just as who else did? Yahshua. All right. Galatians chapter 5, verse 1. And I remind you, when we're reading through this right here, there were people who were compelling folks to be circumcised before being able to join into the assemblies. Okay, so that's part of what we're going to be dealing with here. But in the freedom with which Messiah has made us free, stand firm then, and do not again be held with the yoke of slavery. See, I will say to you that if you become circumcised, Messiah shall be of no use to you. And I witness again to every man being circumcised that he is a debtor to do the entire Torah. Well, you know what? We are debtors to do the entire Torah. You who are declared right by Torah have severed yourself from Messiah. You have fallen from favor. For we, in spirit, by belief, eagerly wait for the expectation of righteousness. For in Messiah Yahushua neither circumcision nor uncircumcision has any strength, but belief working through love. You were running well. Who held you back from obeying the truth? That persuasion does not come from him who calls you. A little leaven leavens all the lump. I trust in you, in the Master, that you shall have no other mind, and he who is troubling you shall bear his judgment, whoever he is. And I, brothers, if I still proclaim circumcision, why am I still persecuted? Then the stumbling block of the stake has been set aside. Oh, that those who disturb you would even cut themselves off. For you, brothers, have been called to freedom. Only do not use freedom as an occasion for the flesh, but through love serve one another. For the entire Torah is completed in one word in this: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And if you bite and devour one another, beware lest you be consumed by one another. And I say, walk in the Spirit, and you shall not accomplish the lust of the flesh. Now, note that he is about to tell them the same thing that he told the Corinthians. Okay? Verse 17. For the flesh lusts against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh. And these are opposed to each other, so that you do not do what you desire to do. But if you are led by the Spirit, you're not under the Torah, and the works of the flesh are well known, which are these: adultery, whoring, uncleanliness, indecency, idolatry, drug sorcery, hatred, quarrels, jealousy, fits of rage, selfish ambitions, dissensions, factions, envy, murders, drunkenness, wild parties, and the like, of which I forewarn you, even as I also said before, that those who practice such as these shall not inherit the reign of the heaven. Why would Paul bring up all that stuff from the Torah to say that those who practice them will not inherit the reign of Elohim? Maybe it's because someone's been twisting his words to their own destruction. Just saying. Verse 22. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, trustworthiness, gentleness, self-control. Against such, there is no Torah. There's your point. All right. And those who are of Messiah have impaled the flesh with its passions and the desires. If we live in the Spirit, let us also walk in the Spirit. Let us not become conceited, provoking one another, envying one another. And I want to look at Ephesians chapter 5 also. I'll start reading in verse 1, page 1135. Become then imitators of Elohim as beloved children, and walk in love as Messiah also has loved us and gave himself for us, a gift and an offering to Elohim for a sweet-smelling fragrance. But whoring and all uncleanliness or greed of gain, let it not even be named among you, as is proper among set-apart ones, neither filthiness, nor foolish talking, nor coarse jesting, which are not fitting, but rather thanksgiving. For this you know, that no one who whores, nor unclean one, nor one greedy of gain, who is an idolater, has any inheritance in the reign of Messiah and Elohim. Let no one deceive you with empty words, for because of these the wrath of Elohim comes upon the sons of disobedience. Therefore do not become partakers with them, for you were once in darkness, but now you are in the light in the Master. Walk as children of light, for the fruit of the Spirit is in all goodness and righteousness and truth, proving what is well-pleasing to the Master, and have no fellowship with the fruitless works of darkness, but rather reprove them. For it is a shame even to speak of what is done by them in secret. But all matters being reproved are manifested by the light, for whatever it is manifested is light. That is why he says, wake up, you who sleep, and arise from the dead, and Messiah shall shine on you. See then that you walk exactly, not as unwise, but as wise, redeeming the time, because the days are wicked. So then, do not be foolish, but understand what the desire of Yahweh is, and do not be drunk with wine, in which is loose behavior, but be filled with the Spirit, speaking to each other in psalms and songs of praise, and spiritual songs, singing and striking the strings in your heart to the Master, giving thanks always for all to Elohim, the Father, in the name of our Master, Yahushua Messiah, subjecting yourselves to each other in the fear of Elohim. Do you know where all these transgressions come from, and where they're amplified and where they're encouraged? They come from the world. They come from Satan, but they come from the world. And the world gets out and encourages all of this loose behavior that Paul's condemning here. Right? That's one of the reasons why we need to not be of the world. Right? Now I've got one more note from Paul. Colossians chapter 3, verse 1, page 1144. And the reason I bring that up as we approach atonement is because that's where so much of the garbage that we find ourselves getting into is being fed from. Colossians 3:1. If then you were raised with Messiah, seek the matters which are above, where Messiah is, seated at the right hand of Elohim. Mind the matters above, not those on the earth. For you have died, and your life has been hidden with Messiah in Elohim. When the Master, who is our life, is manifested, then you also shall be manifested with him in esteem. Therefore, put to death your members which are on the earth, whoring, uncleanliness, passion, evil desire, and greed of gain, which is idolatry. Because of these, the wrath of Elohim is coming upon the sons of disobedience, in which you also once walked when you lived in them. But now, also, put off all these: displeasure, wrath, evil, blasphemy, filthy talk from your mouth. Do not lie to each other, since you have put off the old man with his practices, and have put on the new one, who is renewed in knowledge according to the likeness of him who created him, where there is not Greek and Yehudit, circumcised and uncircumcised, foreigner, Scythian, slave, free, but Messiah is all and in all. Therefore, as chosen ones of Elohim, set apart and beloved, put on compassion, kindness, humbleness of mind, meekness, patience, bearing with one another, and forgiving each other if anyone has a complaint against another. Indeed, as Messiah forgave you, so also should you. But above all these, put on love, which is a bond of the perfection, and let the peace of Elohim rule in your hearts, to which indeed you were called in one body, and be filled with thanks. Let the word of Messiah dwell in you richly, teaching and admonishing one another in all wisdom, singing with pleasure in your hearts to the Master in psalms and songs of praise and spiritual songs, and whatever you do in word or deed, do all in the name of the Master Yahushua, giving thanks to Elohim the Father through him. It sounds to me like Paul is on board with this Torah stuff, I mean. These sound like the kind of transgressions that people might need atoning for. I mean, look at James chapter 4. Yaakov chapter 4. I'm going to start reading verse 1 on page 1176. And it says, where do fightings and strivings come from among you? Do they not come from your displeasures that battle in your members? You desire and do not have. You murder and are jealous and are unable to obtain. You strive and fight, and you do not possess because you do not ask. You ask and you do not receive because you ask evilly in order to spend it on your pleasures. Adulterers and adulteresses, do you not know that friendship with what? The world is what? Enmity with Elohim. It's hard to have one foot in the Word and one foot in the world. Okay? Friendship with the world is enmity with Elohim. Whoever therefore intends to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of Elohim. How many people here want to be an enemy of Elohim? 1, 2, 3, not it? Yeah. Or do you think that the Scripture speaks to no purchase? Does the Spirit which dwells in us intensely crave unto envy? But He gives greater favor. Because of this, He says, Elohim resists the proud, but gives favor to the humble. So then subject yourselves to Elohim. Resist the devil, and he shall flee from you. Draw near to Elohim, and he shall draw near to you. Cleanse hands, sinners, and cleanse the hearts, you double-minded. See, that's double-minded, trying to be in the world. One foot in the world and one foot in the Word. All right? And cleanse the hearts, you double-minded. Lament and mourn and weep. Let your laughter be turned to mourning and your joy to dejection. Humble yourselves in the sight of the Master, and He shall lift you up. Brothers, do not speak against one another. He that speaks against a brother and judges his brother speaks against Torah and judges Torah. And if you judge Torah, you are not a doer of Torah, but a judge. There is one lawgiver and judge who is able to save and to destroy. Who are you to judge another? Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow let us go to such and such a city and spend a year there and trade and make a profit, when you do not know of tomorrow. For what is your life? For it is a vapor that appears for a little and then disappears. Instead of your saying, if the Master desires, we shall live and do this or that. But now you boast in your proud speeches. All such boasting is wicked. To him who knows to do good and does not do it, to him it is sin. So we need to be mindful of what Yahushua might find when He comes into this dwelling place. Amen. Well, let's look at another place where Yahushua did a similar deed. Matthew 21. We're going to be on page 941 because we're going to start reading verse 12. Matthew 21, verse 12. And Yahushua went into the set-apart place of Elohim and drove out all those buying and selling in the set-apart place, and overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold doves. And he said to them, It has been written, My house shall be called a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of robbers. If Yahushua would drive out with a whip of cords, turning over tables and chairs of those defiling the hekal of Yahweh, what would you want him to find when he comes upon that dwelling place of the Ruach HaKodesh, which is your body? Right? Because he's demonstrated that he will come in with anger. And he will come in with whips. What do you want him to find when he comes upon your dwelling place of the set-apart spirit? Leviticus chapter 10. While you cry. Chapter 10. Getting around in the book today, aren't we? Leviticus 10, verse 8, page 113. And Yahweh spoke to Aharon, saying, Do not drink wine or strong drink, you nor your son with you, when you go into the tent of meeting, lest you die. A law forever throughout your generations, so as to make a distinction between the set apart and the profane, between the unclean and the clean, and to teach the children of Yisrael all the laws which Yahweh has spoke to them by the hand of Moshe. Now, I'd like for us to see if we notice any similarities between what the priests are supposed to be doing then and what the priests will be doing in the future in the time of Ezekiel's temple. And let's turn to Ezekiel 44. But between what they're going to be doing in the future and what they were supposed to be doing during the time of the tabernacle. So, Ezekiel 44. I'm going to start reading in verse 21. And we're going to be on page 576. Oh, look what it says here. And no priest is to drink wine when he comes into the inner court. And they do not take his wife, a widow, or a divorced woman, but take maidens of the seed of the house of Israel, or widows of priests. And they are to teach my people the difference between the set apart and the profane, and make them know what is unclean and clean. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? And they are to stand as judges in a dispute, and to judge it according to my right rulings. And they are to guard my Torot and my laws in all my appointed festivals, and set apart my Sabbaths. That sounds mighty familiar to what they were doing back then, amen? All right? Hebrews 13:8, we all know what that says. It says, Yahushua Messiah is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Right? So we really shouldn't be surprised. Did Yahushua teach us the set apart from the profane? He sure did. He sure did. All right, look at 1 John chapter 2. We're going to be on page 1186. We're going to start reading in verse 15. First John 2:15. Do not love the world, nor that which is in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. Because all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world. And the world passes away, and the lust of it. But the one doing the desires of Elohim remains forever. We cannot walk in our old ways and expect to be citizens of the reign of Elohim. Okay? Because if we're going to learn the set apart from the profane, we have got to learn where the profane comes from, which is the world, and where the set apart is, which is in the reign of Elohim. All right. We've got two last passages we're going to read today. Might as well stick something in 1 John, because we're going to turn back to 1 John in a minute. But Numbers 15. See, I'm going to stick something in 1 John right now. Numbers 15. We're going to start reading in verse 17. Bimidbar 15. And page 157. Numbers 15, verse 17. And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, When you come into the land which I bring you, then it shall be when you eat of the bread of the land that you present a contribution to Yahweh. Present a cake of the first of your dough as a contribution of the threshing floor. You present it. Of the first of your dough you are to give to Yahweh a contribution throughout your generations. And when you sin by mistake, and do not do all these commands which Yahweh has spoken to Moshe, all that Yahweh has commanded you by the hand of Moshe from the day Yahweh gave command and onward throughout your generations, then it shall be, if it is done by mistake, without the knowledge of the congregation, that all the congregation shall prepare one young bull as a burnt offering, as a sweet fragrance to Yahweh with its grain offering and its drink offering according to the right ruling, and one male goat as a sin offering. Then the priest shall make atonement for all the congregation of the children of Israel, and it shall be forgiven them, for it was by mistake. Do you know what the difference between, do you know what a mistake is? A mistake is when you meant to pour water in the recipe, but you poured a cup of vinegar instead. That's a mistake. When you meant to pour vinegar in to mess somebody else's recipe up, that's not a mistake. It might be a bad decision. All right, see, and bad decisions and mistakes are not the same thing. All right. Verse 26. And it shall be forgiven all the congregation of the children of Israel and the stranger who sojourns in their midst, because all the people did it by mistake. And if a being sins by mistake, then he shall bring a female goat a year old as a sin offering. You realize if you pour that vinegar in that recipe by mistake, and you were supposed to pour water and you've still ruined it, you've still transgressed the recipe, but it was done by mistake. But see, sins done by mistake are still transgressions of the Torah. It's still a sin. Let's see, verse 27. And if a being sins by mistake, then he shall bring a female goat a year old as a sin offering, and the priest shall make atonement for the being who strays by mistake, when he sins by mistake before Yahweh, to make atonement for him, and it shall be forgiven him. For him who does whatever by mistake, there is one Torah, both for him who is native among the children of Israel, and for the stranger who sojourns in their midst. But the being who does whatever defiantly, whether he is native or a stranger, he reviles Yahweh, and that being shall be cut off from among his people. Because he has despised the word of Yahweh, and has broken his command, that being shall certainly be cut off. His crookedness is upon him. And while the children of Israel were in the wilderness, they found a man gathering sticks on the Sabbath day. And those who found him gathering sticks brought him to Moshe and to Aharon and to all the congregation. And they put him under guard, because it had not been declared what should be done to him. And Yahweh said to Moshe, the man shall certainly be put to death. All the congregation stoning him with stones outside the camp. And the congregation brought him outside the camp and stoned him with stones, as Yahweh commanded Moshe, and he died. And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and you shall say to them to make tzitzit on the corner of their garments throughout their generations, and put a blue cord in the tzitzit of the corners. And it shall be to you for a tzitzit, and you shall see it, and shall remember all the commands of Yahweh, and shall do them, and not search after your own heart and your own eyes, after which you went whoring, so that you remember and shall do all my commands and be set apart unto your Elohim. I am Yahweh your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim to be your Elohim. I'm Yahweh your Elohim. And our last passage for today, back over in 1 John, but we're going to be in chapter 4. And we're going to start reading in verse 9. By this, the love of Elohim was manifested in us, that Elohim has sent His only brought forth Son into the world in order that we might live through Him. And this is love. Not that we have loved Elohim, but that He loved us and sent His Son to be an atoning offering for our sins. Now, I have this question. Was Yahshua's offering only the offering that He gave when He was executed? Is that the only offering? I would say the answer is no. I would say it was the offering that He gave every day. Because you see, He said, I do nothing of my own, but only what the Father shows me. So He was sacrificing Himself every single day to show us how we might live in order to enter into the reign of Elohim. He was, you know what? He was a living reminder. Just like that tassel was a reminder that we're supposed to be wearing now, He was a living reminder. And He should still be a living reminder if we are focusing on Him and we are looking to Him to remember to keep what? All that Yahweh has commanded us. So, as we draw near to atonement, let us not make vain His offering, but rather strive to follow His perfect example, brothers and sisters. How would Yahushua react after coming into our own dwelling place of the Ruach HaKodesh? That is a good question. Right? Because we can't have one foot in the Word and one foot in the world. It just won't work. Yevrekeka Yahweh ba'ishmareka ya'er Yahweh panavaleka bikaneka yasa Yahweh panavaleka b'yasem lakash shalom. Yahweh bless you and guard you. Yahweh make His face to shine upon you and show favor to you. Yahweh lift up His face upon you and give you His complete contentment.